Okay, well, it looks like folks are rolling in and getting logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Ann Byerly with the City of Golden, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Rimrock Drive Parking Design Alternatives discussion that we're going to have tonight. We're going to start this evening kind of with some introductions from the staff that are participating in this call from Jefferson County and Golden, and talk a little bit about the format. This is a little bit different than what we've had before. And then I'm going to turn this over to Christina Duff, who's a senior planner with Jefferson County. She's going to give us information about kind of the overall access and trailheads planning effort, the conversations and feedback summary we've had specific to Rimrock. We have some updated concepts she's going to run through, and then we are going to ask some Mentimeter questions. We used this last go round. If you were with us then, you should be familiar about it, but what you want to do is with your smartphone or a tablet or in a separate folder on your computer, you'll want to go to www.menti.com and enter the access code 7901151. You don't need to know this right now. We'll have lots of time to get to this later, but we will be using that to get some polling questions. And then we will have some time, we expect, for some open discussion. To be clear, Christina's going to do the lion's share of the talking tonight, but I wanted you to understand that there's a bunch of people who are on the call from both Golden and Jefferson County Open Space who are listening. Dan Hartman's here, who's the Golden's Public Works Director. I'm Ann Byerly, I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works. Joe Purr, our city engineer, is here. We're all here to hear what you have to say and help answer questions. On the open space side, in addition to Christina Duff, Tom Hobie, their director, is on the call tonight, and Hillary Merritt, their deputy director. So you've got a lot of people listening to what you have to say, in addition to telling you kind of where we've gone from our last conversations. The format for tonight is a little bit different. We're using a WebEx meeting format. This is a different platform than we've used before. And there's a few things about it that are going to look a little bit different. The first thing probably need to explain is that right now, Golden staff and Jefferson County staff are panelists in this meeting, and everyone else is outside of the meeting watching. What that means is that while Christina is talking and doing her presentation, the best way for you to communicate and ask questions and have comments is to use the Q&A function. We don't have a chat function in this platform right now, but the Q&A will work very similarly to that. You can ask a question, it'll post, and we can see it. Those of us that are panelists can respond to your questions while Christina is talking, but without it, if there are questions that we don't get to, before we get to the Mentimeter questions that we're asking you, we will make sure that you get all the answers you need to the questions that you provided during the presentation. When the presentation is done, when we've kind of gone through that Q&A process, we're going to bring everybody into the meeting. We're all going to be panelists. And at that point, you'll have the ability to unmute and to ask questions, and we can have more of a conversation about what's going on. But for the presentation, we're going to stick with that Q&A function. And we're hoping that this is, you know, kind of a format and a layout that allows us to have a really respectful and civil conversation about all of these pieces. And I hope that everyone learns a lot. And if you have any trouble with any of these tools, we do have Diane Taberi participating, who provided you with information about how to participate in this meeting, and she's a good resource during the meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Christina to run the show for us.
Thank you so much, Ann. So good evening, everybody. As Ann mentioned, my name is Christina Duff. I'm the senior planner with Jeffco Open Space, and I'm managing the South Table Mountain project. So First, I want to show you where we've been as we've been working through our recent community engagement process about planning related to South Table Mountain's access and trailheads. I will say that once we've engaged with you in June, we had some great feedback, and we're really excited to show you what we've come up with since then. So we started, we've been evaluating South Table Mountain's access and trailhead opportunities for several years. And we started the most recent plans with a spring stakeholder listening tour, which was then followed by a live virtual community meeting in April. And during that community meeting, and then the 30 days that followed, we had a public comment period where we're requesting feedback on these plans. Following this window, we had neighborhood meetings with interested residents. And specific to the Rimrock Drive access point, the City of Golden's Mobility and Transportation Advisory Board, or MTAB, evaluated this road for potential complete street improvements that would improve the multimodal connectivity for bicyclists and pedestrians. In June, we held a community meeting in partnership with the City of Golden, specific to the access points on Rimrock and Golden Hills. And we received feedback during this meeting, which many of you have attended, and held a public comment period for the following 10 days after that. Following this engagement, the City of Golden City Council has provided input on potential design alternatives, which brings us to this evening's meeting, where we really look forward to showing you where we've come based on the feedback that we received. Following this meeting, we're going to incorporate the input that you've given us into our final design-making process, which will help inform the final design, or excuse me, final decision-making process, which will help inform the final design. And our intention is to finalize this design by the end of this year with construction in 2022. Next slide. That's okay, Anne. Don't worry.
Jeez, I've frozen up again. But I'm sharing PowerPoint. I had it. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to try this one more time. Okay, I don't know what when I go look at questions, I seem to freeze up. I will not be doing that.
Thanks, Anne. As we discussed during previous community meetings, Jefferson County Open Space approaches park planning using 5 components: natural resources, park and heritage resources, trails, visitor information and management, and access and trailheads. During park planning, these components may be addressed one by one or in a group based on the need or condition of a park. This approach allows us to be more flexible and responsive to issues and opportunities as they arise. And tonight, we'll be focusing specifically on the design concepts for Rimrock Drive, which is part of the access and trailheads planned improvements. In case you've not attended a previous community meeting, I'll give you a brief overview of the park level improvements we're planning, which are shown in this future conditions map. Additional information is located on the South Table Mountain Park page of our website, and that web address you can see at the bottom of the screen. We're working with the Department of Energy on a proposed land exchange that would enable us to develop a future trailhead at Denver West on the southeast corner of the park. We're also planning to improve the existing access point at Golden Hills Road by paving the parking area and increasing parking to accommodate approximately 20 cars. This improvement is planned to help address existing issues of on-street parking around this access point. Finally, we're planning to add designated off-street parking at Rimrock Drive. As we've seen in the surrounding areas of South Table Mountain, on-street parking can cause challenges at park entry points. This location on Rimrock Drive is one of the few access points of our ownership where off-street parking is possible and the approach road is not a loaded street. And that means that there are no residences before the proposed parking area. At this location on Rimrock, there is an unauthorized trail connecting to the trail system on top of the mesa. And as we discussed during our 2020 public engagement efforts for the updates to the trail system at the park, we will be developing the Shoshanite Trail from Rimrock Drive to the Dome Flow Trail, which will have a sustainable design to minimize erosion and habitat fragmentation, which are issues that are often associated with unauthorized trails. And you can see the Shoshanite Trail in purple hatching on this map connecting between the Rimrock access point and the Dome Flow Trail. Next slide, maybe. There you go.
Yay!
Woo. So for the rest of this meeting, we're going to be focusing specifically on the development of the Rimrock Drive access point. Next slide. Now, during our meeting with the community in June, we shared 3 initial concepts on Rimrock Drive. Due to the steep grade and the location of the utility lines that are to the far east of this section of Rimrock Drive, or along South Golden Road to the west, the flush restroom and parking spaces were positioned as they're shown here. And in this first concept, this is showing parallel parking, which is most similar to the existing conditions. There are 30 parallel spaces in this design, along with a turnaround so that the visitors don't need to use the interior neighborhood streets. Now, please note that there's also a 10-foot sidewalk added to the north side of the street and a 5-foot climbing lane on the south side of the street. And the drive lanes are narrowed to 11 feet in width, and that's in order to calm traffic speeds. And these multimodal improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians were recommended by MTAB and will be depicted in all of the concepts shown this evening. Next slide. Okay, so in the second initial concept, we showed the same position of the restroom and 30 head-in parking spaces. Head-in parking allows visitors to enter a parking space from both directions and is a more traditional design for off-street parking. Next slide. So finally, we showed the alternative for back and angled parking. This concept, or this option, is considered the safest alternative because visitors are pointed out when they return to their lane of travel. And with this parking design, car doors open towards the park, so the car door could then become a barrier to prevent kids or dogs from running towards traffic into the street. In this design, we're showing 30 parking spaces and a turnaround, as the visitor would be required to be heading west to back into this spot. Next slide. So during the June meeting and for about 2 weeks following, the Mentimeter survey was available for park visitors and residents to share their feedback. And in total, we had 141 participants. So thank you very much for everyone that provided their feedback. We really appreciate it. On the screen here, you're going to see that there are mixed results on the concepts that were shared for Rimrock. Survey respondents then shared open-ended comments, which were some common themes that were also reflected in the chat window during that meeting. These comments included requests to move the parking farther downhill, questions about the need for parking, finding a balance to minimize those impacts to neighbors, concerns or support for the inclusion of a restroom, questions about the usability of parallel parking or back and angled parking, and also with making sure safety is a priority. Since the meeting in June, Golden City Council has discussed the planned parking on Rimrock, and they are in support of designated parking spaces and the inclusion of a restroom due to the potential public health issues in its absence. So for the following updated concepts, a restroom has been included in all of the alternatives. Next slide. Okay, so here's an updated concept. Here we have the flush restroom to the west end of the parking area. This concept also includes 2 ADA spaces by that restroom that will be accessed with a pull-in, pull-out hammerhead design. And due to the steep angle or steep grades in this area, there will be approximately a 12-foot retention wall around the restroom and the ADA parking spaces. And in this concept, there are 32 back and angled spaces, as well as the 2 ADA spots. And you'll see there's a 2 to 6 foot wall on the north side of the sidewalk for retention. The turnaround is on the east side, which allows for park visitor traffic to remain on that first part of Rimrock Drive and not to enter the neighborhood to turn around. And as noted before, you're going to see a 10-foot concrete sidewalk on the north side, a 5-foot climbing wall on the south side of the street. And then again, those drive lanes are being narrowed to 11 feet in width based on MTAB's evaluation. And this is really to improve safety and again, that multimodal access to the park and surrounding areas. And in these concepts, you'll see that the Shoshanite Trail is designed to connect to the kiosk area. So you're going to see that this alignment is going to change throughout these alternatives. And the trail's alignment will be designed to support that final parking design. So that's going to be a change you'll notice. Now, please bear in mind, these concepts are all in the design phase and have not been reviewed by an engineering firm. So therefore, they are subject to change. Next slide. Okay, so this is another version of parking with that restroom in that same position on the west end of the parking area. This concept also has the 2 ADA spaces by the restroom, 12-foot retention walls, that 2 to 6 foot wall on the north side of the sidewalk. Now this concept includes 45 head-in parking spaces that are utilizing that same footprint that you saw in the back-end angled version. And there's no turnaround included in this one because the cars will be able to pull in or back into parking spaces from either direction. Next slide. Now, in these following two concepts, the flush restroom is located to the east side of the parking area, but still more than 200 feet from open space's property line. And this concept shows how far west we could push that restroom location while still having access to those utility lines that are to the east. And so given the relatively flat grade in the area, there will be no retention walls or hammerhead access required for the ADA parking spots or the restroom. So in this design, you're going to see there are 32 back and angle parking spots plus those 2 ADA spots on the far east side of all those spots. And there's, again, going to be a 2 to 6 foot wall on that north side of the sidewalk for retention. And the turnaround is to the east of the restroom. Next slide. And in this last concept, we show head-in parking alternative with the same alignment of the restroom on the east end without a turnaround. There's 46 head-in parking spaces here plus 2 ADA spaces, and they're using that same footprint as you saw in the previous concept. So these are the 4 revised concepts that we want to share with you to get your feedback. So if we'll go to the next slide. Here's a brief synopsis of what everything has. So the constants, the givens, is, again, this is all based on conceptual design work only. So they need to be vetted by an engineering firm. So elements are subject to change. We're looking to move everything at least 200 feet from the neighbors to the east. The Shoshanite trail will connect to the kiosk. So that trail alignment will be determined based on the final design of this improvement. No matter what the design, they will be flush restrooms with automatic locking devices. So the restrooms would be closed when the park is not open. So if on the same park hours, the restroom would be open. Following MTAB's recommendation, there's going to be a 10-foot concrete sidewalk with 2 to 6 foot walls on the north side, that 5-foot climbing lane on the south side, and the drive lanes are going to be narrowed to 11 feet. All of the concepts show 2 ADA parking spaces, and the back and angle parking options require a turnaround. Now, specific to the western options, so these are the 2 options where you have the restroom to the west side. You're looking at approximately 12-foot retaining walls that would very likely be visible from South Golden Road. The back and angle spots have 32 spots, plus the 2 ADA. Head-in parking for that same footprint is about 45 spots, plus 2 ADA. And given that steep grade on the west side of the property, ADA parking is going to require that hammerhead turnaround. Now, because of where the restroom is positioned in relation to the rest of the parking spaces, there is the potential to expand, if required in the future, sometime down the road, to the east. So those parking spots could continue up the hill if that's something that happened, you know, in some time in the future. This is the most expensive option that we've evaluated. Estimated cost is about $1.5 million. Some of the big expensive factors here are those retaining walls and the distance to the utilities that are available on South Golden Road. Now, the Counterpoint is your eastern option where you have the restroom on the east side of the parking spaces for both back and head-in. The restroom is going to be at grade, so there's no retaining walls. For parking, your back and angle spots will be 32 plus 2 ADA spots. For head-in parking, you've got about 46 spots plus 2 ADA spots. And the ADA parking spots are going to be at grade, so you don't require that hammerhead pull in, pull out design that you saw on the west side, nor do you require those retaining walls. Now, given the location of the restroom on the far east side of this parking, you have the potential to expand parking to the west sometime in the future. This is an estimated cost of approximately $1 million. And as you can see, one of the most significant differences here is the cost. The difference of $500,000 has significant implications to open space acquisition, conservation, and park improvement efforts across our system, and is a factor that the agencies are going to be considering when we're making those final decisions on the final design. And so these are the options. Excited to share them with you. And do you want to open it up for questions, and then we can go to the Mentimeter?
We have a handful of questions that have come up in the Q&A. The first one is whether or not, and this is a repeat question from previous conversations, but it's worth mentioning again, is have we reached out to the churches about shared space and parking with them?
So I'll say specifically just about the churches, and Hillary, if you want to jump in as well. The challenge with negotiating with the churches is that they use the parking spaces when people come to the park. So turn my video back on, sorry about that. So when folks are, off work, weekends, evenings is when people are also going to the churches. So that's not really going to handle the capacity concerns that we have, as we're noticing around this park and many of the parks in our system.
We had another question that's maybe more a question for the city of Golden about pointing out that there are probably some other places where, well, I'm really struggling reading. Are the lack of bathrooms public hazards in other locations? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop sharing. And then I can see the questions. Are the lack of bathrooms and public hazards in other areas, and why just in this area? And I think anytime you have people congregating, the lack of a bathroom can be a hazard, because if people need to use the restroom, they should have them. What we heard from council when Dan took this to council a couple months ago, Golden City Council, was that when we have an opportunity in an environment like this to add a restroom, we should. We certainly heard from council that there are other places in the city where there are parks and recreation opportunities where we haven't been able to add restrooms, and there's regret that we've missed those opportunities. But there's also I think this is more a comment. There are several mobile homes and homeless that already park on the hill, and this would be another attraction. I think that's so noted. Are we offering any parking spots with electric charging stations for the parking lot?
None are planned at this point. And the one comment about with trailers and stuff parked there, just remember that the drive lanes are going to be narrowed quite a bit, and then you're going to have designated parking off street. So it's going to look different from what you're used to today.
The original open space meetings in April and June identified up to 30 spaces, and now all of these options show more. Why do you increase the numbers of spots, parking spaces?
Tom or Hillary, I don't know if you guys want to jump in, but as you can see, it's a very big financial lift. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to approach this big construction, we're going to do it once and have a sustainable number of parking spaces, I would say. And so we also use, as you can see for comparison, we use that same footprint to give you an idea of the differences of the alignments.
Brian asked the question, and we have been told that the Rimrock location is an access point, but he'd like to know the difference between an access point and a trailhead. This continues, according to Jefferson County's Rails to Trails, an access point is merely just that, an access to a trail that does not have all the amenities of a trailhead. Also, have you conducted any traffic study to evaluate the increased traffic and congestion that will certainly result if you move forward with your plans?
And I'll go ahead and answer that one, and Christina can jump in if she'd like. I'll take the first part. I'll let you traffic folks take the second part. As far as the difference between access point and a trailhead, certainly it's nuanced. Generally, our trailheads these days are being designed to accommodate a larger number of cars. In this case at South Table Mountain, we're looking at 100 to 120 cars at the main or regional trailhead that we're looking at Denver West. In this particular case, I think there's very little opportunity on the west side of South Table Mountain that serves the city of Golden to have safe, legal parking. And that's been a challenge that I'm sure the Golden folks can note with the Lubon Trail in that location. So certainly that's a discussion we can continue to have on the number of parking spaces. And then in terms of traffic volumes and capacity, I'll turn that over to the Golden folks to answer.
Brian.
Go ahead, Dan. Oh, Joe and Dan both were going to jump in.
Right. So the city standard for when a traffic impact study, and Brian, that seems to be what you're asking about, when a traffic impact study is required is 100 peak hour trips, 100 trips in that peak hour. This trail access point and parking lot would not come close to that.
And
Okay,
could I at the risk of going backwards here a little bit, could I add a little bit more on the restroom piece?
Of course.
So a couple of considerations. When we do not have a public restroom, whether it's a portalet, which we definitely don't particularly like, or a permanent facility, we see a much better hygiene situation around that particular trailhead area. When we don't have them, we see people doing what they do in a dispersed fashion that has an impact on water quality, aesthetics. And when there's no vegetation, there's also exposure issues. So hate to be graphic about this, but in this particular location, it's wide open and there's not a lot of screening material for people to do their business if there isn't a restroom facility. And then secondly and lastly, I'll point out, I'm assuming that many of you have been to our restrooms. We are often complimented about the cleanliness and appearance of our restrooms. There are public restrooms, and then there are our restrooms. We take a lot of pride in how we build and maintain those facilities.
We have about 30 questions to go. And one of the almost immediately questions that happened is, as an attendee, are we not allowed to see the questions that are being asked? And I was under the impression that everyone could see the questions. That apparently is not the case. So I'm going to read them, and I apologize for that. The next question is, what is Hammerhead parking? Joe or Dan?
I'll take it. It's so without the graphic, it's hard to explain. Basically, it's an extension of the drive lane to allow for vehicles that are head in 90-degree parked to back up out of that space and have room to back up so that they can angle their way out.
Okay. We also have a question. It's more, I think this is more of a comment from Brian. For example, the turnaround area is near a congested blind corner that will certainly result in increased traffic with the potential for accidents. Further to my knowledge, MTAB neither evaluated nor discussed this specific plan in detail in any of their meetings. Certainly there was no recommendation that resulted in from any of the MTAB meetings. In the 20 years that we've lived in this neighborhood, there has never been an issue with access to the South Table Mountain trails from the Rimrock access point. I'm going to take that as a comment. And there's another comment about the church parking lots never being full even on Sunday. I think Christina indicated that negotiation has not borne fruit, which is why we're talking about the alternatives. So let me keep going. Oh, yeah, this gets back to the spots have increased from the past design. Christina explained that as being an issue around just acknowledging the investment that you're making. Oops. Oh, struggle. I am really. Does the data show that the large number of spaces will invite more people in terms of cars and foot traffic on South Table Mountain? Go ahead, Dan.
The only thing I can say is that parking isn't the attraction. It's South Table Mountain and the trail and the access. And that is the attraction, not that there's parking there. So over time, having the ability to accommodate the attraction is probably more important than the worry that having the ability to accommodate them and they don't come. So that is not a question we can completely answer, but if the attraction invites the people and you can't accommodate them, that's worse than if they show up and you can.
I'm having a couple of questions. We continue to have questions about the number of parking spaces, about the need for the amenities that are being suggested. Christina, can you repeat your comments on the narrowing of the street and why that isn't why that was your response to the question about homeless parking along Rimrock?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the way that Rimrock is set now, it's so wide that there's space for folks to park on either side. So you could have more long-term parking than probably the intended use in that area. So when Golden works through the narrowing of the drive lanes, you're not going to have that extra space. All you're going to have are those designated parking spaces that's going to have a lot more activity. So people coming in and out, people are more aware of the activity going on there, more attention. But if anyone else wants to speak more to that, by all means.
Joe or Dan, it's already very difficult to turn left off of Rimrock onto South Golden Road during high traffic time. How will this additional traffic be addressed?
I would say that, we can certainly study it, but this location is very unlikely to ever meet a warrant for a signal or a roundabout or anything like that. I don't disagree that at peak times, making left turns in this location, just about every location can be difficult. But I don't know that it would ever rise to the level of meeting a warrant to add a signal here.
Thank you.
And I would add that, we're talking about a road that has 500-ish cars a day, and we're going to go to 550. It's in the long term, it's not a big change.
Given climate change, why does Golden or Jefferson County Open Space plan around the concept of trail access with cars? I understand that making trails accessible to everyone is ideal, but surely there are some clever alternatives that don't include bringing more cars, traffic, and pollution to Golden.
Sure, I'd like to take that one, Ann, if I could.
Sure.
And Christina can jump in as well, I'm sure. So we are studying right now a variety of alternatives to access our parks. Public transit, rideshare. We currently have a rideshare trial going on with Lyft right now at South Table Mountain and several other popular trailheads where we're actually subsidizing people's ride to encourage them to take Lyft. We adopted the Jeffco Trails plan last year that talks about trail connectivity. so that people can access them by means other than vehicles, or parks other than vehicles. We are looking at reservation systems or timed entry. Basically, all of these things and more are on the table that we're looking at. But we do have a present day real time issue with people still being in love with vehicles and wanting to be able to drive to the location that they want to recreate at. I'm sure that some have seen, even at a recreation center, when people are going into an exercise class, they're driving around the parking lot looking for the closest in parking space. It's just where our society is today. And it's going to take a while for that to shift. So we definitely embrace the idea of having people use alternative means. And I do really appreciate the suggestion about adding some electric charging stations. We'll look at that.
I have a question from Samantha. Have studies been done on the elk migration that move through the specific areas? They move from the golf course across South Golden Road and up onto the South Table Mountain in January, February, and March. I can answer probably that hasn't occurred as it relates to this project, but I can tell you that the Division of Wildlife has been studying the herd, that it's a local herd that lives in Golden and comes across on the crossing across 6th Avenue, and they understand its migration very well.
And I can speak, I can give some more detail on that too.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
within our planning groups, we have representatives from all our teams that work on all these projects. So we have our senior wildlife biologist has been working on this specific project that we've been looking at for parking and access at South Table. And in her engagement with CPW, they've done a series of collaring studies on these elk. Their goal is actually to keep the elk on the other side of 6 because there's so many hazards that these elk encounter across, the eastern side, basically. So please be aware that that's something that they're working on. And so it is being actively studied, yes.
And it's fair enough to say that the Parks and Wildlife would like to keep them on the west, and CDOT would like them to not get hit by cars. And there's sometimes those things are in conflict. I have 2 related questions. One says that there's a 15-foot retaining wall at Walgreens visible from South Golden Road. So why the concern about the retaining walls and the western options being visible from South Golden Road? And then a related question, which is the impacts of 2 to 12-foot retaining walls on wildlife movement will be considerable. How will this be mitigated? So I guess maybe the questions are, why do we care about the height of the retaining walls?
I mean, I just brought that up because that was something that was raised in discussion in our last community meeting. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that, so as a consideration. Again, when we look at, we have a wildlife biologist on part of this team. That retaining wall is going to be, the large one is going to be very specific just to your footprint of the restroom and those 2 ADA spots, and their pull in and pull out, how they access it. So it's a really small area. The rest of it, you're going to see that small lift of a 2 to 6 foot wall. Again, this needs to go through engineering to understand how truly that will be, but that's going to be a much less significant issue that we have there.
Can you provide examples of other Jefferson County open space access points that have restrooms?
That's a good question. We're actually working through 17 large projects specific to access and trailheads in the next few years. So we're evaluating all of that. The challenge that I didn't bring up earlier, I've brought this up in previous meetings, it's South Table Mountain is one of our most porous parks, with access coming in 360 degrees based on the surrounding development. So we're finding that it's unique because not everyone's funneling through a main trailhead. You're having just as much activity coming from different directions, and they might never go to that east side of the park. So that's where we're finding a true issue here. But I don't know, Tom, Hillary, I'm trying to think of the rest of the system.
There are any that come top of mind. There may be a few, but I think the important point here is what Christina talked about, is the the availability of facilities from the west side of South Table Mountain, and I think we're getting into a little bit of semantics with access points and trailheads. For example, at White Ranch, we have an east and a west trailhead. Both of them have restrooms. At Apex Park, we only have a restroom at the main trailhead. At Windy Saddle and at Lookout Mountain, we have restrooms at both locations there. And while we call Windy Saddle a trailhead, it's both that and an observation point, a beautiful scenic view, etc. And it's significantly smaller access point than Rimrock is because there's no room to accommodate cars there. So it's definitely a bit of a passers-by and scenic viewpoint kind of scenario.
The next question is concerned that traffic will go through the neighborhood during high traffic times, and this needs to be addressed.
Certainly, we are aware that that's a potential. We have data on the pre-construction condition, volume data on the streets through the neighborhood. We would monitor that, and if it does indeed become an issue, we would look for ways to mitigate.
Loretta Huff had to leave, but wanted to be clear that that if there is the need for a bathroom, I think it best represents the desires of the neighborhood to have the bathroom on the west side, and that she is sure the retaining walls can be nicely designed. And further, she supports head-in parking to eliminate the need for cars turning around in the street below the curve at the top of the hill. So that, I think, is more a comment, and we'll keep going. Cara, I'm not sure I understand this question. And maybe this is just a comment. We actually live on the mesa, and there has never been any issues around these areas. I'm not sure. I think, again, maybe that's a good comment. Diana's a question concerned about cutting at the toe of the slope for parking. I seem to recall a slope stabilization issue when Highway 93 was rerouted in the 1980s or 90s to join Highway 58 and 6. I believe the new road was reconfigured to accommodate the stabilization issues. What work will be done to ensure the same thing does not happen at Rimrock, and what would be the backup plans if the slope failed, regardless of the engineering calculations? Dan, you're the only one that was around back then. This is you.
Okay, I'm old. The slope stabilization problem on 93 occurred after we built the bypass road, and we did not redo the road. They did a project to stabilize the slope. The geology there is quite a bit different, actually, a lot different than what we have over off Rimrock. It's interesting if you go across Golden. There are a handful of geologic faults that occur all the way through till you get to the west side. And if you look at it, there's this Laramie, there's a Fox Hill, there's all kinds of different layers. But by the time you get over to Rimrock, we are in an entirely different environment. And the Golden Rimrock tank was dug into the hillside and constructed 7 years ago, actually even before my time. And we have had no problems whatsoever. But obviously, as the project goes forward, those evaluations will be done, but there is absolutely no reason to believe it will be a problem.
Lyndall, I think this is a bit of a vote. But 2 of the new proposals locate the restroom very near homes. Is there any opportunity to shift the design west so that it is not so near homes? I think we have 2 that are to the west and 2 that are to the east. So the answer is, I guess, yes. But the reason for this is there's an increasing problem with overnight camping on the mesa. And not only does this invite more, but locating them so close to homes is a security concern. I'm going to take that as more of a comment.
Hey, Ann, can I just jump in on that real quick? We would set these restrooms up so that they are locked. They have automatic locks on them that open and close only when the park is open. So that's one way we could curtail some of that activity.
Tom, the next question actually goes exactly to that. Can you talk a little bit more about the locking mechanisms and how are they monitored at all?
They are automatic locks. They're put on a solar clock, so they correspond with our park hours, which is 1 hour before sunrise, 1 hour after sunset, for parks like South Table Mountain.
Thank you. Brian's changed a comment into a question. In the 20 years that we've lived in this neighborhood, there has never been an issue with access to South Table Mountain trails from the Rimrock access point. For example, not an issue with traffic or parking, etc. So why are you trying to fix something that is not broken?
I can speak to that. So we did not have an authorized trail from Rimrock, and that's part of the 2020 trail system design work that we're going to add a trail there. So as we've seen at South Table, we mentioned the Lubon challenges, and as we've seen across our system, if there's an access point, people are going to park there. So we're trying to get ahead of this to be proactive and not have the neighborhood suffer if we're not actively addressing what could happen.
Okay. The inability to turn left onto South Golden Road will divert people through the Rimrock neighborhood. I think that's a comment. Some in the neighborhood would like the safety issues of the blind corner addressed. Has the City of Golden looked into this existing and current safety issue?
I guess I'm unsure what blind corner we're talking about.
I think it's up at the kind of top of the hill as you head into the neighborhood.
I haven't spent much time looking into that. I can tell you that there's not a high frequency of accidents at the location, so it may not be an ideal configuration for a neighborhood, but it doesn't seem to be leading to any increase in accidents.
Thank you. Mary is interested in what the specific costs of the bathroom are, including the total cost of the bathroom, including plumbing and electric.
I don't have the itemized estimates in front of me right now. Sorry.
Okay.
We have another team member on. We can probably get that answer fairly quick.
Georgina is okay. I'll just read this. It's hard to. Right now, the attraction of South Table Mountain at Rimrock is not drawing people to visit it. So the logic is incorrect. It's an issue of supply and demand. More supply of parking will increase demand. Has anyone looked at the current use of this part of the park to justify investment into this access point?
Yeah, I mean, you were seeing the challenges with Lubon, so that's another access point just north of here that the City of Golden is really having challenges with those neighborhoods. Again, there's not the challenge with the way that the park is situated in the neighborhoods is that there's not a lot of square footage options for us to have off-street parking. So we're having those demands flow through the neighborhoods and impact them, especially on the weekends. So yes, we're very much having current challenges at this park and many of our parks. And so that's why we need to look at an investment to, again, protect our resource and also help support the neighborhood in the area.
Initially, Jeffco said they would not advertise Rimrock parking and in fact would work with social media to push parking to the new trailhead at Denver West. With the significant investment and increased size of the parking, will Jeffco and Golden promise to still direct traffic to Denver West?
So I'll answer that, Ann. So this access point, along with any others to our system, would be reflected on our park maps, which are on our website, which are distributed at our various parks and throughout the community. I certainly, we certainly will want to, on social media platforms, places like Google Maps, where people are coming from well outside the area, direct those folks through those platforms to the Denver West Trailhead. That is what we intend to be the main trailhead for the park. However, it is a public park, and these are public points of access, and we can't limit people to say you can only access the park from Denver West, but it is our intention on those various platforms where people are searching for opportunities to get outdoors, that we would point them to that Denver West Trailhead to the best of our ability. Sometimes it's difficult to get Google and other like organizations to really change what they have on their platforms.
Will narrowing the street and inviting more traffic cause more congestion and accidents?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. Narrowing the street tends to slow speeds down, doesn't really impact congestion on a road with only, roughly 500 vehicles a day. Congestion, I don't believe, is going to be an issue. And certainly narrowing the roads on any of the roads that we've narrowed around town hasn't led to any additional congestion, and certainly not any more accidents.
Thank you. This gets to the turning left onto South Golden Road. Could the speed limit on South Golden Road be reduced to 25 around Rimrock?
I don't know that I'm a fan of that. To answer the question, yes, it can be done. It starts if you have, sort of. We've already got the roundabouts that reduce the speed, but it's kind of bad engineering form to increase and decrease and increase and decrease the speed limit on roadways. So it can be done. It would take quite a lot of study and a full understanding of what the impacts might be.
Thank you. What modeling does supports Dan's comment that traffic will only increase from 500 to 550 cars per day? Where does that come from?
We have not done any modeling around that. Right now, we have 500-ish vehicles a day on Rimrock, and you add 25, 30 parking spaces, you are not going to add another 1,000 vehicles a day, but we can ask for a detailed traffic analysis. My guess is that is a fair amount of money that won't tell us anything that we already don't know. We're not going to get 1,000 extra cars a day driving up and down. That would be double what's there today. So if it's a serious concern, we certainly can have the analysis done.
Okay. I have a question from Elizabeth asking if we can put the graphics of the proposed parking alternatives up because she couldn't join till late. I tell you what, as we have a handful more questions we want to get through. Once we get through those, we'll pull up the presentation again. We'll go through the 4 alternatives that we went through, and then I have some Mentimeter polling where I'd like to get some feedback. So yes, we will do that. And I apologize that you're getting to listen to a whole bunch of questions that maybe don't have a lot of context. Can signage be added like residential access only? Like at the top, after the turnaround to limit traffic into the neighborhood?
Not generally. I am not generally a fan of that sort of signage. Certainly it can be added. It is exceedingly difficult to enforce for PD. A police officer has no idea of knowing, whether or not the individual has actual, lives in the neighborhood or is visiting somebody in the neighborhood. So it is a sign that cannot really be enforced. So it tends to not have a whole lot of meaning.
I have another question again on the churches. What was the financial compensation that the city offered to the churches to share parking? The city has not negotiated with the churches, and the city has not offered financial compensation to the churches. And I'm not aware that that open space has either. I'm hearing a no from a shaking of a head from Hillary. So we have not offered financial compensation for shared parking. Okay, I have another ELK question. I'm going to consider that answered. Thank you all for your comments, and I just want to thank the panelists for all the thoughtful responses to all the questions. This is very helpful. You're welcome. Comment, not a question. Given the infrastructure in this country, I think small vehicles are an unavoidable component of any transport. I applaud the efforts to embrace alternative transportation mechanisms, but it makes perfect sense to also plan to accommodate cars in trail access. Hopefully those cars are increasingly electric, but undeniably Americans will continue to use cars to get to trails. Thank you, Ben. Another question about traffic studies, but I think Dan has answered that that we have not completed one. Mary points out, for those that are curious, that there's a bathroom at the Camp George West Trailhead. Oh. So audio. So Lyndall is having problems with audio, so she's afraid we may have answered this, but she missed it. She's wondering if there's any way to shift the whole eastern option to the west, further towards South Golden Road and further from the homes. And I think, and what other restrooms are well. So I think we have definitely talked about that. Christina, do you want to hit that one real quickly again?
Sure. We are limited to the location of the utilities, and that's as far west as we can move that restroom for the eastern option. The western restroom is connecting to utilities off of South Golden Road.
Could we shift it any further to the west?
Once we go to an engineer, we can see what that looks like. That could be our part of the stipulations. How far west can we go? But based on our understanding, that's why it's positioned there. But we can absolutely ask that of the engineers.
Really specific question: can we get the trail installed prior to the parking and restroom construction?
The answer is yes, it can be physically built. The challenge with doing that out of sequence is that it could interfere with the construction of what we've been talking about here. And prior to that, it could create some challenges with parking situations that we haven't really accommodated there, but it could be built prior to these other facilities. Those are just some of the challenges.
The traffic data for when was the traffic for the adjacent neighborhood gathered? Was it gathered during the pandemic?
Both before and after, well, during pandemic, I would say the last count I did on Rimrock was in early 2021 as you know, volumes are creeping back up, but I can't promise that it was back to pre-COVID levels. Certainly prior to any construction here, I could, you know, take counts again and have a better picture, assuming that we're out of COVID traffic patterns, and we may never fully get out of you know, get back to pre-pandemic traffic patterns.
I have just a general question about maybe just construction. I'm not exact. Well, not. I just have a comment that says construction, so I'm not sure exactly, Gunter, what you meant by that. If you want to jump in with more information, that would be great. If there are concerns about the additional cost of the bathroom, why not scrap the bathroom as an amenity entirely?
I mean, I think as we've talked about quite a bit, you know, it's a public health concern, and we're stewards of the land. We want to make sure that this land is protected. And so, as Tom mentioned, when we have nice restrooms, people use them. When we don't, they use the land. So it's really just in the best interest of protecting our asset as a park and also protecting the neighborhood from those folks that live nearby.
Thanks.
And
it looks like potentially the question on construction was, what's the time frame for construction? So if you could help with that, please.
So construction is tentatively scheduled for next year, so 2022. We'd be doing the work at Rimrock and Golden Hills in the same year. And then given the larger scale of Denver West, should this land exchange proposal go through, that would be the following year, so 2023 estimated time for construction. 2023 to 2024 for that one.
Okay.
okay, also in the current Golden CIP budget that is going through council, we have construction money in 23 to partner with open space to do parking, but also do the complete street and design in 2022. And that's where Golden's money sits.
Thanks, Dan. I have a comment from Cara about people going to the bathroom next to the trail with a note that I've never seen any issues around that in this particular area. I think that is yet another comment. I wanted to say thanks to Tom for the comprehensive comment regarding climate change. However, even myself as a car enthusiast, I think Golden should lead the way in showing Colorado how great our city would be with less cars, more pedestrians, more bikes, e-trikes, shuttles, and other clever methods. But again, thanks for that, all that you are doing with research into alternative trail access. So I'm going to go to the next question. Folks go up the mesa when the park is open. Okay, it's another one I think is a comment, sorry. Can you please reiterate why the plan is to add parking spaces and narrow the road when the already wide street there can accommodate about 15 cars on each side? The restroom is understandable, but the work and expense to narrow the road and add parking spaces are not. The concern is, okay, go ahead, Dan.
Part of Golden's walkability plan has to do with complete streets. And we have heard repeatedly about the problem with pedestrians having to walk in the street in that section of Rimrock. So it's been part of our complete street program. And this affords us an opportunity to partner with Jeffco and create great sidewalks and a much better pedestrian feeling street. And it's one of the things that is a huge opportunity that our city and certainly our city council is looking at, that this is out there, but we might not get to it for 10 years. But here's an opportunity to do it and do it very well in the short term.
Thanks, Dan. I have a handful of questions that the tone of which is, I feel the potential traffic issues are not being taken seriously and are being brushed aside because there haven't been enough accidents yet. Why are we considering additional parking before we know if it's needed? And would a better approach be to add the trailhead and then evaluate if additional parking is needed? Anyone feel like we haven't addressed this? But I think it's worth noting we've had a few people say not quite sure you're taking the potential traffic issues seriously.
I assure you, I take them very seriously. I don't think that this is the volume generator that folks think that it will be from a vehicular traffic standpoint. We can certainly analyze that, as Dan mentioned, but it just experience tells me that this is not going to double the amount of cars on Rimrock. And I also, there is potential certainly for this to migrate through the neighborhood, and I don't want that to happen. But they are, after all, public streets, and people have the ability to drive on them. I think one thing that we didn't mention about the parking configurations, the back end angled, we kind of mentioned the safety aspects of it. As you get out of the vehicle, you're headed to the rear of the vehicle, away from the travel lanes. But another added benefit is that as folks get in their vehicles to leave, they will be pointed away from those residential streets that we don't want them to be driving on. So much easier for them to travel to South Goldwyn Road and away from the park, and not through the neighborhood.
Thank you. Anya answers, and is there a map you can share with more detail about the trail route options and proposed design specifications? Anya, I'm going to point you towards the end of the presentation. There's a general email address for Jefferson County Open Space. I think that's a conversation probably best had with some Jefferson County Open Space folks outside of this meeting. And I apologize for doing that to you, but I think that makes sense. We still have quite a few questions to go, and in about 10 more minutes, I'm gonna move us towards getting into Mentimeter and having some survey, kind of trying to get some feedback through that process. There's a question about automated locks and who's going to be responsible for maintaining them. I think that is, again, I think Tom has answered that question earlier, that would be Jefferson County's open space, and that they have experience with maintaining those systems. There's another request that the traffic analysis be done. I think, and modeling, and what was the plan? Oh, what was the plan versus actual parking use at the West Trailhead for North Table Mountain? That's putting you on the spot for a project from a while ago.
Yeah, we don't have that information off the top of our heads,
Okay.
but we can certainly supply it if that person wants to contact us.
Okay. Other than moving the official trail to the not yet built Shoshanite trail, is there a plan to block off the trail off the existing trailhead and the use of the access road that backs to home? Yes, there is a plan to restore the social trail and revegetate along there. There is also a plan to better fence off the access road that goes up to the city's water tank so that it is not used recreationally. We've avoided doing that because the social trail that people use is so steep that the road at times is a better alternative, and we've just not undone that. But yes, there is a plan to do both of those things. Another question about, there's a lot of people who are hanging on to the idea that we should have done a really specific traffic analysis. Is the Golden Heights parking still on the plan to relieve pressure as well?
Golden Hills, is that what they mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
I think,
Christina
yes.
mentioned that earlier. We're going to improve that to include 20 parking spaces.
This summer, we were told there has not been a count of park users. Has usership yet been assessed?
So the challenge with South Table is, again, it's really porous. So what we're looking at is working on big data collection. So the idea is you can track where people are coming from any direction, and they can come in and come out in any other way. So we're still working on that for having a better understanding of our full system. So that's still in the works.
Just a couple other things to add in, and big data is usually derived from cell phones. And so we have estimates on overall visitation, but our system consists of 27 park locations with over 250 points of access. It's extremely difficult to pinpoint that. I can tell you that a study that the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics did a study of public land managers throughout the area, and the increase in visitation to public lands is 141, 142% of normal. We estimated ours going up by a little bit more than that, but we trust Leave No Trace's study, and we'll call it somewhere in that 140% range. In South Table Mountain, as we've done various improvements to the trail system there, is definitely becoming more popular. Those of you who are up there on a regular basis, including myself, see that, and that is the business we're in, is getting people outdoors and providing healthy nature-based experiences.
Tom, before you turn off your camera, this is probably you. Which entities, you and Dan, which entities and what percentage are paying for this?
Okay, my understanding is that Ann, you and I are paying for it, but this keep laughing, Tom. Don't send me a check. It is general open space money that is money that that is collected throughout Jeffco for open space, and it is money that is dedicated to providing Jeffco residents the experience.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, and we are required to spend open space sales tax dollars for park and open space purposes only. And that is something that we will make sure happens here, that we're only paying for things that relate to the access that Dan just spoke of. If there are other improvements that the city wishes to do to the roadway that aren't associated with that, that we would expect would be a city cost.
And I will follow up on that because Tom and I have talked, and we are completely in agreement that anything that has to do with sidewalks, that has to do with pedestrian flow through complete streets, or replacing current asphalt that is aging, or curb, gutter, and sidewalk, the city of Golden will pay for all of that. And that open space will pay for the cost of this project around the expansion to create parking. And there are going to be some impacts around our desires that interfere with theirs. And I think they pay for that, but we pay for everything else. And I think we're very much in agreement on all of that.
I have a question that's a little out of left field. Is the new trail going to be built to accommodate mountain bikes?
Yes,
Yes.
it'll be a multi-use trail.
Okay. Okay, we have a handful of unanswered questions, but as I look through them, quite a few of them are comments and quite a few of them are repeats of what we've had before. And there is certainly a strong feeling across them around traffic control, traffic mitigation, and whether or not the bathrooms are necessary. So I apologize if I've missed something. I think there's a question about construction timing, and I don't know that construction duration, and I think until we actually get engineering going, that's not a question we can answer. But with all Golden construction projects, you'll hear from us before it starts up again. And so that will be, in fact, as we move forward with finalizing designs, it's not like we're going away. We'll still be around. So I am going to, I'm going to pull up our Mentimeter questions. I'd like to encourage everyone. I'd like to, let me see if I can find it. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
We have just a handful of questions, and it is 7:20. So I'd like us to I'd like to go through just a handful of these questions. Oh, and you know what I promised to do? I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to pull up the presentation. And I'm going to go really quickly through the 4 options that that we had discussed earlier. We have back and angle parking with a west end restroom. And if you'll recall, this had significant retaining walls and a restroom on the west end and a turnaround on the east end, and 32 back end angled spaces. We have a west end restroom with head-in parking. So same footprint, but this is able to accommodate 45 spaces if head-in parking. So again, 2 options, similar footprint, restroom on the west end, and either head-in or back-in angled parking. And we have 2 options with an east end restroom. And this is a back end angled parking, 32 spaces again, and a restroom on the east end, but much fewer retaining walls. And similar 46 head-in spaces, so 1 extra space on this one with the same footprint, and an east end restroom. So I just wanted to make sure that because we got away from all of these concepts, and I'm gonna pull up Mentimeter again. And for those of you that have a tablet or a phone with you, you want to go to menti.com, METI.com, and enter the code 7901151. And we just, like I said, I just have a couple of questions. Let's see. The first one is, you know, what is the drive time from your home to this access point on Rimrock Drive? I'm suspecting if you live in the neighborhood, you're in the 0 to 5 range, but this will give us a gauge of I think from the questions we got, we're expecting this to be neighborhood dominated, but wanted to get the demographics. You guys are all doing very well. We have about 22 people responding. I think we have about twice that on the call, or at least there were at one point. So I'll give everyone a second more to figure out how to use this. And really, in some ways, this is kind of my cheater question to get you all practiced on Mentimeter. Okay. And thank you for whoever was clever and answered option 5, which who knows what that means. That was clearly me getting quick on pulling together Mentimeter questions. So very clearly we have a real strongly dominated group that is from the neighborhood, and I don't think that's surprising whatsoever. Thank you. Come on. Oh my goodness. I'm really fighting this today. There we go. How often do you use Rimrock Drive access to get to South Table Mountain? We have daily, weekly, routinely, but not weekly, and occasionally. Okay, that's a pretty close number to what we had in our last question. For you neighborhood folks, you need to get over there and use it. I live on South Table Mountain in Applewood, and routinely, always, these are cool things to have in our backyards. Okay. Really the crux of the questions that we have, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the 4 design alternatives that we proposed in order of your preference. The first one, what you like better, best to worst. And I'm having a horrible feeling. Okay. I was terrified there that maybe I set up the question wrong and we weren't going to be able to get any answers. Okay, I think we're seeing a quick theme that West End restrooms are more popular than the East End. Okay, I have a few of you that haven't weighed in yet. All right. Well, I think this is not necessarily particularly surprising. I think maybe the only thing that's maybe surprising to me is that the parking option with more spaces is in first place with the West End restroom. Back end was second. Those are super similarly close, and then the East End restrooms are clearly not as well received. I have one final question to get a little feel for this, and what is the primary reason for your preference? Okay. I think, and this is the end of my of our questions, our scripted questions. I think we got wrapped up in the written Q&A a little bit and have rolled right into the end point of this meeting without an opportunity for some conversation. So I apologize for that. I suspect that Christina and I will probably talk over the next couple of days just to make sure that there aren't any questions that we didn't actually get to. We might want to provide a little bit more information either on Guiding Golden or on South Table Mountain if we just flat out missed something that got asked tonight. We can work on that. But really appreciate the conversations. Really appreciate the tone this evening. I thought everyone asked really specific questions to the project and questions that will give us all a little bit to think about and certainly will help us move forward. With that, does anyone else on this panel want to jump in and have any closing thoughts for the group?
And I just want to jump in and thank folks for their participation tonight, all the good questions and comments and so forth. It's helpful to have a full understanding of the issues, the pros and cons, the things that we need to take into consideration as we move ahead with design in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Oh, you know what? I have Christina, what's on our next step slides? And I'm not even going to attempt to share.
Oh, no, you already covered it. And so just stay tuned to guidinggolden.com or the South Table Mountain webpage on the Jeffco Open Space website, and we'll keep you informed as to how things are going, the next steps. But really appreciate, as everyone has said, really appreciate your feedback and all the time you've given to us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.